I'm Owen, and I turned 18 a few months ago, or at least I was supposed to. My parents didn't really let that happen. The day that was supposed to mark my freedom ended up being the night everything changed between me, my brother, and the people who raised us. I grew up in a house where everything revolved around my older brother, Caleb. He was 2 years older, the gifted one, the golden boy, the future doctor. At least, that's how my mom always described him to anyone who'd listen. Every time a family friend came over, she'd find a way to mention his grades or how he sacrificed his weekends to volunteer at the hospital, which, by the way, he did exactly once. My dad wasn't much better. He'd beam with pride every time Caleb so much as existed. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid who liked to draw, read, and keep to myself. If Caleb got an A, we'd go out to dinner. If I got an A, I'd get told, "Good job, buddy," before the conversation moved back to him. I didn't resent it at first. I told myself that's just how families work. Some kids are more outgoing, more charismatic, more seen. But as I got older, the difference became impossible to ignore. When I was 16, I saved up for months to buy a used guitar. I wanted to learn music seriously, maybe even study it one day. I remember showing my mom the instrument with this huge smile, waiting for her to say something nice. She looked at it, frowned, and said, "That's nice, but you should really focus on something practical, like your brother." That sentence haunted me for years. Like your brother. It was their favorite comparison. Caleb was the sun in our house, and I was the shadow that proved his light existed. Still, I try not to take it personally. I worked after school at a small grocery store, put aside every cent, and did my best to stay out of trouble. I told myself that when I turned 18, I'd finally be treated like an adult. I even planned a small birthday dinner. Nothing fancy, just a few friends at my favorite diner. But 2 days before my birthday, Mom sat me down in the living room with that look she always used before bad news. Caleb was sprawled across the couch, scrolling on his phone. "Owen," she started, "we've been thinking maybe it's best if you don't do a big celebration this year." I blinked. "A big celebration? Mom, it's just dinner with friends. I'm paying for it myself." She sighed like I was being unreasonable. "It's not about the money. It's just, your brother's been feeling down lately. He didn't get into his first choice med school, and we don't want to make him feel worse by, well, you know, making a big deal about your birthday right now." I actually laughed, thinking she was joking. "You're kidding, right? You're canceling my 18th birthday because Caleb didn't get into college." Dad chimed in from behind his newspaper. "Watch your tone, son. Your brother's going through a hard time. You can celebrate later." I stared at them, trying to process what I was hearing. Celebrate later. As if turning 18 was something you could just postpone until it was convenient for someone else. Caleb didn't say a word. He just smirked at his phone, pretending not to listen. That night, I lay awake replaying every little moment where I'd been pushed aside for him. Every birthday where he got the bigger gift. Every Christmas where I unwrapped socks while he got a new laptop for studying. And now, even my 18th birthday wasn't mine to have. I tried reasoning with them again the next morning. "I've already told my friends. I paid for the reservation. It's not fair to cancel now." Mom's voice sharpened. "Life isn't always fair, Owen. You should be more understanding. Caleb's your brother. Don't you care about how he feels?" That last question hit me hard. Because I did care. I always had. But it was never returned. Caleb never once skipped a celebration for me. He never once toned down his own happiness for my sake. I guess the rules only went one way. I skipped breakfast and went for a walk to clear my head. It was late February, cold and gray, and I remember thinking how fitting that was. My almost birthday day looked like it was mourning something. When I came back, Mom was on the phone with Aunt Linda, saying how mature I was for agreeing to cancel the celebration. Caleb was sitting in the kitchen eating pancakes, and he looked up at me with this smug little grin. "Guess I'm still the favorite," he said, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. I didn't reply. I just turned around and went to my room. That's when something in me shifted. I realized I couldn't keep waiting for them to value me. They weren't going to wake up one day and suddenly see me for who I was. So, I started planning. Not for revenge, not yet, but for freedom. I went through my drawers, packed the essentials, and tucked the rest of my savings into my backpack. I didn't have much, about $1,200, but it was enough for a few weeks if I was careful. I spent the next day pretending everything was normal. I smiled at dinner, laughed at Caleb's stupid jokes, and waited. Then, when the clock hit midnight, technically my birthday, I quietly walked out of the house with my bag slung over my shoulder. The cold air hit me like a slap, but it felt good. Real. I remember standing at the end of the driveway, looking back at that house, and thinking, this is the last time they'll ever take something from me. I found a cheap room to rent near the community college and started working extra shifts at the grocery store. It wasn't glamorous, but for the first time, I was free. No guilt trips, no comparisons, no Caleb. Weeks turned into months, and little by little, I built my own life. I saved enough to move into a small apartment, started taking online classes, and kept teaching myself guitar. Every milestone I hit, I thought about how they would have found a way to ruin it, and I was grateful they couldn't anymore. Then, about a year later, everything came crashing back. It started with a text from my mom. Can we talk? I ignored it. Then came another one from Dad. Your brother's been having a tough time. Maybe you could help him out, since you're doing so well now. That caught my attention. Doing so well? How did they even know? I hadn't told them anything. Turns out, Caleb had found my Instagram. He saw the photos of my apartment, my guitar, the small but growing YouTube channel I'd started for my music. He saw the comments from people supporting me. And for someone who'd always been the golden boy, seeing his lesser brother thrive without him must have been unbearable. Because the next thing I knew, he showed up at my door. And that's where everything really started to unravel. I'll never forget the sound of that knock. 3 short, impatient raps, the kind that didn't ask permission, they just announced, I'm coming in whether you like it or not. When I opened the door, Caleb was standing there with his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, chin tilted slightly upward, wearing that same smirk he always used when he wanted to look superior. He didn't say hi. He just looked past me into my apartment like he was inspecting it. So, he said finally, this is where you've been hiding. Hiding. That's what he called it. Not living, not moving out, not starting over. Hiding. I didn't answer right away. My first instinct was to shut the door, but curiosity, and maybe a trace of old brotherly instinct, made me step aside. You want to come in? I asked, my voice flat. He shrugged. Sure. The moment he walked in, I regretted it. His eyes scanned the place like he was looking for proof that I didn't belong there. The cheap secondhand furniture, the stack of dishes drying on the counter, my guitar propped up by the window. Not bad, he said eventually, running a finger over my table. Kinda small though. It's mine, I said. He chuckled, like I'd said something funny. Right? Independent Owen, huh? I told Mom you'd run back after a month. I ignored that and asked, why are you here, Caleb? He finally dropped the fake grin. Mom and Dad are worried about you. You just left. No note, nothing. You know how selfish that was. That word, selfish, made my blood boil. Selfish? You mean like being told I couldn't celebrate my own birthday because you were sad about your college rejection? He frowned, clearly not expecting me to push back. It wasn't like that. Oh, it was exactly like that, I said. You sat there eating pancakes while they canceled my birthday dinner for you. You didn't even try to stop them. He looked at me for a second, then shrugged. It's not my fault they care about me more. You can't blame me for being the favorite. I don't know what I expected, maybe some guilt, or at least some awareness. But hearing him say it so casually felt like someone pressing a thumb into an old bruise. So that's it, I said quietly. You came here just to remind me you're still their golden boy? He grinned again. You sound jealous. That's when I realized nothing had changed. He wasn't there to apologize. He was there because he'd seen me doing well, and it bothered him. I walked to the door and opened it. You should go. For a moment, I thought he would argue, but instead he smiled that infuriating smile and said, fine. But don't be surprised if Mom calls soon. She misses you. After he left, I just stood there, staring at the closed door. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger. I tried to shake it off, telling myself he'd disappear again. But a week later, my mom showed up. I came home from work and saw her car parked outside the building. She was leaning against it, clutching a paper bag. Owen, she called when she saw me. Finally, I sighed. Mom, how did you even find where I live? Caleb told me. She said like it was nothing. Don't be mad. We just wanted to see you. I didn't have the energy to argue, so I let her in. She looked around the apartment, much like Caleb had, but instead of mocking it, she just sighed dramatically. You shouldn't be living like this. This place is so plain. It's what I can afford. She set the paper bag on my counter. I brought you some food. You're probably not eating properly. Inside were containers of leftovers, Caleb's favorites. Mom's famous lasagna, chicken parmesan, even that chocolate pie she always made for him on his birthdays. You know I don't even like most of this, I said softly. She looked genuinely confused. Really? I thought everyone loved my lasagna. Of course she did. She never noticed the details about me. We sat at the table, and she started talking about how things had been so hard since I left. How my dad was stressed, and Caleb was trying his best after his second college rejection. Every sentence started with how someone else was feeling. Not once did she ask how I was doing. When she finally did, it was in the form of a backhanded compliment. You seem happy. I didn't think you'd last this long out here. You were always so sensitive. I bit back the urge to laugh. You mean, I didn't let you walk all over me? She frowned. Don't start, Owen. We're trying to fix things. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then she said the thing that made me realize fixing things meant something very different to her than to me. Your brother might move in with you for a while, she said casually. Just until he gets back on his feet. I froze. What? He needs a fresh start. You've clearly managed to do that for yourself. I thought maybe you could help him. Set an example. I stood up. You can't be serious. She blinked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Owen, he's your brother. Families help each other. I laughed, an ugly, bitter laugh that surprised even me. You mean, I help him while you pretend it's fair? You never helped me when I needed it. Her tone turned sharp. Don't talk to me like that. We gave you everything. I looked around my tiny apartment, the place I'd built from nothing, and said, No, Mom. I gave me everything. You gave Caleb everything else. She stood there, speechless for once. Then she picked up her purse, muttered something about me being ungrateful, and walked out. For the next few weeks, things went quiet. I focused on work, classes, and music. My YouTube channel started gaining traction. Not huge numbers, but enough that I could see a future forming. Then, out of nowhere, Dad called. I hadn't spoken to him since I left. Owen, he said, his voice measured. Your mother's worried sick. You shouldn't have spoken to her that way. Dad? I said tiredly. She wanted me to let Caleb move in. Well, he needs a place, Dad said, as if that explained everything. He's family. So am I said quietly. But that never seemed to matter. He sighed. You're being dramatic. We've always loved you. I almost laughed. Yeah, maybe in theory. There was a long pause before he said, If you don't want to help, fine. But don't expect us to support you when things go south. That was the last straw. You haven't supported me in years, I said, and hung up. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not just anger or hurt, but clarity. I realized that I didn't owe them anything. But the universe wasn't done testing that realization. A few days later, Caleb showed up again. This time, he wasn't alone. He had a suitcase. Don't freak out, he said, setting it down by the door. Mom said you'd let me crash here. I just stared at him. No, absolutely not. Come on, man, he said, running a hand through his hair. It's just for a couple weeks. My roommate kicked me out, and you've got the space. I have one bedroom, I said, and you can afford rent. You've got a job. He hesitated. Yeah, about that. I quit. Of course he did. Caleb never stayed anywhere long enough to face consequences. I crossed my arms. You're not staying here, Caleb. He rolled his eyes. Wow, you really think you're better than everyone now, huh? Big man with a YouTube channel and a crappy apartment. Get out, I said. He didn't move. You know, Mom's right. You've changed. You used to be nice. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. You used to be tolerable. That got his attention. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I saw a real anger flash there. You're gonna regret this. And then he left, but not before snapping a photo of my apartment as he walked out. I didn't know what he planned to do with it, but I found out soon enough. A few days later, I got a message from my aunt. Are you okay? Your mom said you're struggling and refusing help. Don't be too proud, dear. It didn't take long to piece it together. Caleb must have shown my parents that picture, claiming I was barely scraping by. They probably told the whole family I was too stubborn to come home. The pity calls started trickling in. The texts. The passive-aggressive "we're praying for you" messages. It was humiliating. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I doubled down on my work. I uploaded more music, grew my audience, and even got a small sponsorship deal. The better I did, the more desperate they seemed to get. Then, one evening, as I was finishing a recording session, I got another knock at my door. This time, It wasn't Caleb. It was all three of them: Mom, Dad, and the golden boy himself. They stood there like a united front, each with a different expression. Mom looked anxious, Dad looked stern, and Caleb looked smug. "Can we come in?" Mom asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. The moment they sat down, I knew it wasn't a social visit. There was tension in the air, the kind that only comes before a storm. Dad spoke first. "We need to talk about this attitude of yours." "What attitude?" I asked. Mom jumped in. "You've been distant, disrespectful. We've tried to help you, but you keep pushing us away." I almost laughed again. "Help me? You canceled my 18th birthday because Caleb didn't feel special enough. You tried to move him into my apartment. And now you're saying I'm the problem." Caleb crossed his arms, leaning back in the chair. "You really love playing the victim, huh?" That was it. Something inside me snapped. I looked at each of them, the people who'd made me feel invisible my entire life. And for the first time, I wasn't scared to speak. "You know what?" I said quietly. "Maybe I am done being the quiet one." And just as I was about to tell them everything I'd held back for years, all the resentment, all the pain, Caleb smirked, leaned forward, and said something that changed everything. Caleb's smirk said everything before the words even left his mouth. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, that fake casual confidence dripping off him like oil. "You think you've got it all figured out, don't you, Owen?" he said. "Your little apartment, your YouTube channel, your independence. You really think that makes you better than us?" I didn't answer. I was still trying to understand why they were all here, sitting in my tiny living room like it was an intervention, except no one looked concerned about me. They looked angry, threatened. Mom clasped her hands together and took a shaky breath. "We didn't come here to fight, sweetheart. We need to be honest about something." My gut tightened. What's that supposed to mean? Dad's jaw flexed like he was forcing himself to stay calm. "Your mother and I were talking, and we think it's time you come home." I blinked. "What?" Mom nodded. "This whole living on your own thing was fine for a while. But it's gone too far. You're isolating yourself. You're being prideful. Caleb needs support, and we need our family back together." There it was again, Caleb needs. It was always about what he needed. I tried to laugh it off, but my chest felt tight. "You're joking, right? You can't just decide I move back in." Dad frowned. "We're not deciding. We're asking. But you're making this harder than it needs to be. We just think it's best for everyone." "For everyone except me," I muttered. Mom's voice softened, almost pleading. "Owen, honey, your brother's been through so much. He didn't get into med school again, and he's been depressed. You know how fragile he can be. So what? I'm supposed to move back home to cheer him up?" Dad's tone hardened. "Don't talk about your brother that way. You wouldn't even have that apartment if it weren't for us." I froze. "What's that supposed to mean?" He glanced at Mom, then back at me. "We helped you get started, whether you realize it or not. That money in your account when you moved out, it came from us." My head snapped up. "What?" "No, it didn't. That was from my job at the grocery store. I saved every—" Mom interrupted, her voice trembling with fake sadness. "We transferred some money into your savings when you were 17. We wanted to give you a safety net. But that money is still ours, technically." The room went silent. I could hear the faint hum of the fridge, the distant cars outside, and the slow, dawning realization that this wasn't about family or concern. It was about control. I stood up. "So, what? You think that gives you the right to tell me how to live my life?" Dad's eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't even have this place without that money. We deserve some respect." Caleb chuckled under his breath. "Sounds like someone owes the family a little gratitude." I turned to him, anger boiling up. "Gratitude? You mean the guy who never lifted a finger in his life wants me to be grateful?" He shrugged. "You wouldn't last a week if they cut you off." I wanted to yell, to scream. But something about the smug look on his face told me that's exactly what he wanted, for me to lose control so they could play the victims again. So instead, I took a deep breath and said quietly, "Get out." Mom's voice cracked. "Owen, get out." Dad stood up, glaring. "We're trying to help you. Don't make us regret it." I didn't move. "You already should." They left eventually, slamming the door behind them. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. A few days passed. I tried to move on, focusing on my music, recording late into the night. But there was a tension I couldn't shake, the feeling that something was brewing behind the scenes. And then it happened. I woke up one morning to a flood of notifications on my phone. comments, messages, mentions. My YouTube channel, the one I'd spent a year building, was blowing up. At first, I thought it was a good thing. Maybe one of my songs had finally gone viral. Then I saw the title of a new video spreading like wildfire. The truth about Owen, the liar behind the music. My stomach dropped. It was a 15-minute video, uploaded by some random account that had only been created the day before. But the voice? I recognized it immediately. Caleb. He'd used a fake name, distorted his voice slightly, but there was no mistaking the way he spoke. The same smug pauses, the same little inflections. The video showed screenshots of my Instagram, my YouTube analytics, even clips from my live streams. He claimed I was faking my success, that I'd stolen money from my parents, that I was playing the victim to make them look bad. He even implied that my followers were being scammed by a kid pretending to be broke. It was like watching someone burn down your house and narrate it like a bedtime story. At one point, he said, "Funny how Owen acts like a self-made man when all his bills were paid by mommy and daddy." Guess being the family disappointment finally paid off. I felt sick. I tried to report the video, but it had already been shared on Reddit and Facebook. My DMs were full of people asking if it was true, others mocking me, some even calling me a fraud. I called my parents immediately. Mom picked up on the third ring. "Did you know about this?" I demanded. She hesitated. "Owen, calm down. You knew?" My voice shook. "You knew, didn't you?" She sighed. "Your brother was just trying to tell his side of the story. People deserve to know what really happened." "What really happened?" I shouted. "You mean your version? Where I'm the villain for wanting a normal birthday?" Dad's voice joined in from the background. "You brought this on yourself, Owen. You cut us off. You left us no choice." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You let him do this? You let him drag my name online?" Mom said softly, "You should have just come home." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I sat in my dark apartment, staring at the glow of my laptop screen. The video had hit 20,000 views. The comments section was a battlefield, half the people defending me, the other half tearing me apart. And then I saw a comment from Caleb's personal account. "Guess success runs in the family. Some of us just earn it honestly." I slammed the laptop shut so hard the sound echoed through the apartment. For the first time in my life, I didn't just feel angry. I felt betrayed. Utterly, deeply betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect me. They didn't just ruin my birthday, or my childhood, or my peace of mind. They were actively trying to destroy everything I'd built. I barely slept that night. My thoughts kept spinning. Flashes of Caleb's smirk, my mom's voice, my dad's threats. I thought about all the times I'd excused their behavior, all the times I'd told myself they'd change. But now, I saw it for what it was. They didn't want me back because they loved me. They wanted me back because they couldn't stand the idea that I was doing better without them. The next morning, I got another text from Caleb. "Caleb, hey, bro, sorry about the video. I'll take it down if you apologize to Mom." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling that mix of disbelief and numb fury. "Me, you posted lies about me online." Caleb, "Not lies. Just perspective." "Me, you humiliated me to thousands of people." Caleb, "Then fix it. Say sorry. Come home." I didn't reply. I couldn't. Instead, I turned my phone off and sat in silence. For hours. And that's when I realized something I probably should have seen long ago. They would never stop taking from me. Not until I made them see what they'd done. Not until I took something back. But before I could plan anything, things got worse. Much worse. Because 2 days later, I came home from work and found my apartment door slightly open. The lock was scratched, and the inside looked wrong. Drawers pulled out. Papers scattered. My guitar case, empty. Someone had broken in, and I didn't even need to guess who it was. When I first saw the mess, I didn't even move. I just stood there in the doorway, staring at my small apartment, my safe little bubble, torn apart. It didn't look real. The drawers were emptied onto the floor, my books scattered like someone had stomped through them, and the one thing that made this place feel like mine, my guitar, was gone. For a second, I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Maybe someone random had broken in. Maybe I'd been unlucky. But then I saw it. On the kitchen counter, right beside the pile of my open mail, was a small photo. It was a picture of me and Caleb when we were kids, the one that used to sit on my dresser back home. We were maybe 10 and 12, both in matching sweaters, forced smiles plastered on our faces. I hadn't seen that photo in years. And now it was sitting here, like a calling card. My hands started shaking. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police, my voice trembling as I explained what had happened. They came, took notes, looked around, and basically told me what I already knew. Without security footage or witnesses, there wasn't much they could do. They wrote a report, told me to make a list of everything missing, and left. The moment the door closed behind them, the silence felt heavier than before. I sank onto the couch, surrounded by the wreckage, and just sat there staring at the empty spot where my guitar used to be. It wasn't just an instrument. It was the one thing I'd bought entirely on my own. My first real proof that I could make something of myself. And now it was gone. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every sound made me flinch. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards, everything felt like a threat. I stayed up until sunrise, scrolling through my phone, rereading old messages from my mom and Caleb, trying to piece together how I'd gotten here. The next morning, I went through my drawers again, this time more carefully. I found something I hadn't noticed before, an envelope tucked behind a stack of receipts. Inside was a folded note, written in my brother's unmistakable handwriting. "You should have stayed humble, little bro. Maybe this will teach you." No signature, no explanation, just that. My hands clenched so tight the paper crumpled. I could feel the anger rising in me. Hot, suffocating, and useless. Because what could I do? Call the police again and tell them my brother probably did it? They'd just shrug and say it was a family matter. So instead, I did nothing. I cleaned up the mess, threw the note in a drawer, and forced myself to keep moving. I went to work that day like a zombie. My boss, a kind older guy named Rick, noticed immediately. "You all right, kid?" he asked while restocking shelves. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." He didn't push. He just nodded and said, "You're one of the good ones. Don't let people wear you down." It was such a simple thing to say, but for some reason, it stuck with me. I needed to hear that I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. Over the next few days, I stayed quiet. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text Caleb. I just worked, ate, and slept. The world outside my apartment kept spinning, but mine had shrunk into something small and silent. My YouTube channel took a hit. I lost subscribers, brands stopped replying, and a few of my fans sent messages saying they were disappointed after seeing that video Caleb made. I tried posting a short update explaining that it was all lies, but that only made things worse. The trolls came in full force, accusing me of lying, saying I was playing victim again. It was like screaming into a void that just echoed back laughter. One evening, after another long shift at the grocery store, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee gone cold. The sky was gray, the city humming below me, and for the first time, I felt completely alone. No family, no reputation, no guitar, nothing that made me feel like me. That's when the thought hit me. Maybe this was my rock bottom. And weirdly enough, that gave me clarity. Because if this was the lowest point, then the only direction left to go was up. So I started making small changes. I didn't announce them, didn't tell anyone. I just began rebuilding quietly. The first thing I did was close my old social media accounts. Every single one. I created a new YouTube channel under a pseudonym and began uploading again, using what I had left, my backup guitar, an old mic, and a cheap laptop. I didn't care about followers anymore. I just needed to create. It felt good, almost therapeutic. Like I was taking back pieces of myself they couldn't touch. Then I picked up a second job at a local cafe. The owner, a woman named Claire, hired me without much fuss. She liked my work ethic, and soon I was pulling morning shifts there and evenings at the store. It was exhausting, but it kept me focused. A few weeks passed, and I started to notice something strange: silence. No calls, no texts, no new chaos. It was like my family had finally decided I wasn't worth the trouble anymore. But silence didn't mean peace. It meant they were planning something. I could feel it. One night, after closing the cafe, I came home to find a letter taped to my door. No envelope this time. Just a sheet of paper, folded once. "We want to make things right. Family meeting tomorrow. 6 p.m. Don't ignore us again." No signature, but I didn't need one. The handwriting was my dad's. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Would it make things right even mean in their world? Usually, it meant pretending nothing happened while I apologized for everything. Still, a part of me, the naive part that still hoped for something good, considered showing up. Maybe they'd realized how wrong they'd been. Maybe Caleb had confessed. Maybe they were ready to be a real family. By 6 p.m. the next day, I was pacing my living room, torn between curiosity and self-preservation. In the end, I didn't go. I knew how that meeting would end, with me being guilt-tripped into forgiving them while Caleb sat there smirking. So I stayed home. And an hour later, my phone buzzed. "Mom, we waited for you. This was your last chance to fix things." "Dad, don't bother calling again. We're done." That was it. Years of loyalty, of begging for approval, of trying to prove I was enough, all erased in 2 messages. For the first time, though, I didn't cry. I just felt empty, then calm, because I realized something powerful in that moment. I didn't need them anymore. But fate, or maybe irony, wasn't ready to let me rest. A few days later, I got an email from a company, the one that had sponsored my music channel before everything went downhill. They'd seen the drama online and decided to cut ties. My small source of income was gone. It hurt, sure, but part of me had expected it. The damage Caleb caused wasn't going to vanish overnight. I spent the next few weeks scraping by. Rent, food, work, repeat. I barely had time to think, and maybe that was a blessing. But every once in a while, I'd look at that empty corner where my guitar used to sit and feel that ache again. Then one evening, as I was closing up the cafe, Claire came out from the back with a letter in her hand. "Someone dropped this off for you," she said. I frowned. "For me?" She nodded. "Guy said he was your brother." My stomach dropped. I took the envelope and stepped outside into the cool night air before opening it. Inside was a single note and a photo. The note read, "You didn't show up." So I showed them the truth. The photo was of me, sitting in my apartment, unaware, taken through my window. I felt the blood drain from my face. That was when it hit me. Caleb hadn't just broken in once. He'd been watching me. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I stayed at the cafe until dawn, drinking stale coffee, staring at that photo, and trying to think. My brother wasn't just cruel. He was obsessed. He wanted me to break completely. But sitting there, surrounded by the hum of the espresso machines and the faint city lights outside, something inside me hardened. He wanted me to feel powerless. He wanted me scared. And for the first time in my life, I decided I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. If this was rock bottom, if they'd truly taken everything from me, then it was time to stop playing defense. Because I might have been the quiet one all those years. But I wasn't stupid. And if Caleb thought he could destroy me and walk away untouched, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. When you hit rock bottom, there's something strangely liberating about it. You stop worrying about what people think of you because, honestly, there's nothing left to lose. That's where I was, sitting in the corner booth of the cafe at sunrise, watching people pass by with their morning coffees, realizing that for the first time in years, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not my parents. Not Caleb. No one. I went home later that morning, cautious and alert. My stomach twisted as I unlocked the door, half expecting another mess, another note, another photo. But the apartment was quiet. Still, just the same faint smell of stale coffee and detergent. I checked every corner before locking the door behind me. Then I sat down at my desk and started writing. At first, it was just lyrics. Angry, raw lines about betrayal and silence and the weight of being invisible. Then, melodies started forming in my head. I picked up my backup guitar, the cheap one I'd bought secondhand years ago, and started recording. It wasn't polished. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. For weeks, I poured everything I had into that project. Every ounce of pain, every bit of anger, every silent scream I'd held back for years went into those songs. I stopped worrying about getting views or sponsorships. I didn't even use my real name this time, just the alias Noah West. I wanted the music to speak for itself, without the baggage of my family's name attached to it. At first, nothing happened. The videos got a few hundred views here and there. A comment saying, "This sounds different. I like it." Another one saying, "You can feel the emotion in this." That was enough to keep me going. By the second month, things started to change. One of my songs, Glass Houses, got picked up by a small music channel that shared underground artists. Within a week, it had 100,000 views. Then came the messages. People from all over saying the song felt personal, that it helped them through things they couldn't even describe. A girl from Canada wrote, "I played this on repeat when my family disowned me. Thank you for making me feel less alone." I didn't respond to every message, but I read all of them. Each one reminded me that maybe, just maybe, Everything I'd gone through wasn't for nothing. By month 3, I was getting emails from indie producers asking if I'd collaborate. One even offered to feature my song on a Netflix teen drama's background playlist. The royalties weren't life-changing yet, but they were enough to cover rent, comfortably. For the first time since leaving home, I felt something I hadn't in years: stability. I quit my grocery store job to focus on music full-time. Claire at the cafe insisted I stay part-time. "Just in case you need a place to breathe," she said. And honestly, I was grateful. She was one of the few people who saw me as a person, not a project. One day, after finishing my shift, she sat across from me at one of the tables and said, "You look lighter these days." I smiled for the first time in a while. "Yeah, I guess I'm finally getting somewhere." She nodded. Funny thing about success, it's loud enough that people start hearing it even when you're not trying to shout. I didn't realize how true that was until 2 weeks later. I got an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "Saw your video. Proud of you." It was from my aunt, Linda, the only relative who'd ever treated me like I mattered. She said she'd stumbled on my new channel by accident and had no idea it was me until she recognized my voice. "I always knew you'd find your way," she wrote. "Don't let anyone take this from you again." Reading that felt like a small healing. Like a piece of the broken puzzle of my past had quietly shifted back into place. But success has a way of attracting attention, even the kind you don't want. A month after Glass Houses went viral, I got a message on Instagram. No profile picture. No name. Just, "Nice song. Shame your parents don't know it's you." My heart sank. I didn't reply, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly who sent it. Caleb. He'd found me again. But this time, something was different. I wasn't scared. I wasn't the same quiet kid who walked out of the house that cold February night. I had something now, something he couldn't take from me. Proof that I could build a life without them. Instead of reacting, I stayed silent. I kept posting music, working, and slowly building my audience. Every song I released grew faster than the last. By the end of the year, my subscriber count had crossed 500,000. And then came the day that changed everything. I was at the cafe when Claire called me into her office. She handed me her phone with a grin. "Look," she said. It was an article. The anonymous musician behind Glass Houses revealed. Meet Noah West. My real name wasn't in it, but the world was starting to notice me. Record labels were reaching out. Interviews, features, even small TV spots. I should have been over the moon, and part of me was, but another part of me felt the weight of what was coming. Because fame, even small fame, has a way of dragging ghosts back into your life. That night, as I was packing up my recording gear, I heard the faint buzz of my phone. A text from an unknown number. "Heard you're famous now. Guess mom and dad were wrong about you." See, no apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just that smug, passive-aggressive tone he'd mastered since childhood. I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. I just let the message sit there, a reminder. But I wasn't naive. I knew him well enough to know he wouldn't stop there. Caleb thrived on control, and losing it, losing me, must have driven him insane. Sure enough, within a few weeks, my parents reached out. This time, not with guilt trips or insults. Just carefully crafted messages that sounded rehearsed. "Mom, we saw you on the news. We're so proud of you. Maybe we could come to one of your shows." "Dad, you've really made something of yourself, son. Let's put the past behind us." I stared at those messages for a long time, reading and rereading them. The same people who disowned me, humiliated me, called me ungrateful, now wanted to celebrate me. And maybe a few months earlier, I would have been tempted to believe they'd changed. But I'd learned something important about them. Their love was conditional. It existed only when I was small enough for them to control. Still, I didn't delete the messages. Not yet. Because a part of me, the strategist in me, realized that I might finally have the upper hand. I didn't respond, but I started documenting everything. The messages, the calls, the comments on my videos from anonymous accounts that somehow always knew too much about my life. I even installed a camera inside my apartment this time, one facing the door, one by the window. If Caleb or my parents wanted to play games again, I was going to be ready. Meanwhile, I kept rising. The label offer came in February, exactly 1 year after my 18th birthday, the night I'd left home. A poetic full circle. They wanted to sign me for a small album deal, creative freedom intact. I signed it that same week. Within months, I was performing small live sets around the city. The crowds weren't huge, but they were mine. Every person there sang along to lyrics I'd written alone in that broken apartment. Every cheer, every clap felt like taking back another piece of what my family had stolen from me. And the money started to come in. Not rich money, but enough to breathe, to pay off debts, to upgrade my studio, to finally buy a new guitar. A better one. When the first royalty check cleared, I stood in my apartment holding it and couldn't help but laugh. I wasn't laughing at the number. I was laughing at the irony. Because for years, my parents had told me that following my passion was a waste of time, that I needed to be realistic, that I'd end up begging them for help. And now, I was earning more from my waste of time than they ever made in a year. I didn't post about it. I didn't brag. But word got around anyway. My aunt called one night, saying she'd heard from someone in the family that my parents were bragging to their church friends about how successful their musician's son was. The same people who once told me I was a disappointment were now using my name for attention. At first, I brushed it off. Let them talk. But then something happened that made me realize this wasn't harmless pride. It was another setup. One morning, I got an invitation in the mail. No return address, just elegant handwriting on thick paper. You are cordially invited to celebrate Caleb's graduation and new career opportunity. The address? My parents' house. And at the bottom, written in my mom's neat cursive, were the words, "It would mean the world if you came." I stared at that invitation for a long time. It wasn't an olive branch, it was bait. And for the first time since I'd left, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. Because I had something I'd never had before, leverage. They thought I was still that quiet kid they could walk over. They didn't realize that the same silence they used to mistake for weakness had turned into something else entirely, focus. So, I put the invitation down, leaned back in my chair, and whispered to myself, "All right, Caleb, let's see how you handle the spotlight when it's not all about you." Because this time, I wasn't going there to make peace. I was going there to make history. The invitation sat on my desk for a full day before I touched it again. Every time I glanced at it, I felt the same mix of irritation and curiosity. A graduation celebration, huh? The timing was too perfect. My career was finally taking off. My name was trending on a few music sites, and now suddenly they wanted me at a family gathering. I could practically hear Caleb's voice behind it, smooth, smug, already rehearsing whatever public humiliation he was planning. But this time, the difference was simple. I wasn't walking in as the forgotten kid. I was walking in as someone who finally had control. So, I decided I'd go, but not unprepared. The first thing I did was call Aunt Linda. She'd always been my quiet ally, the one who whispered encouragement when everyone else dismissed me. I told her about the invite, about the break-in, and about Caleb's little documentary that nearly wrecked my reputation. There was a pause on the line before she said, "Owen, if you're going, you need to make sure the truth comes out on your terms, not theirs." That stuck with me. So, I spent the next week planning. I didn't tell a soul, not even Claire. I bought a couple of hidden lapel microphones and a pen camera. Nothing fancy, just reliable enough to capture every word. I rehearsed in my head what I might say, how I'd act. No yelling, no losing control this time. Just calm, deliberate precision. The night of the event arrived faster than I expected. Their house looked exactly the same as the day I left. Neat lawn, white shutters, lights glowing through the big windows like a picture-perfect postcard. But as I stood there on the porch, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage. When Mom opened the door, her smile was immediate, wide, and unnatural. "Owen," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that felt rehearsed. "You came. Wouldn't miss it," I said with a polite smile. The house was full of people, relatives, neighbors, even a few of Caleb's college friends. There were banners that said "Congratulations, Caleb," and a big collage of photos showing his journey. I noticed that one of those photos was the same childhood picture he'd left in my apartment after the break-in. A chill ran through me, but I didn't show it. Caleb spotted me from across the room. He froze for a split second, not expecting me to actually show up, then broke into that practiced grin. "Well, look who it is," he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "The prodigal son." I just nodded. "Congrats, Caleb. Guess we're both doing all right these days." He smirked. "Yeah, though some of us didn't need to cry online for sympathy to get there." The people around us laughed, uncomfortable, unsure if it was a joke or a jab. I smiled through it, every nerve in my body telling me to stay calm. You're right, I said evenly. Some of us just had to learn to work without handouts. His smile faltered, just slightly. I could tell he hadn't expected me to be collected. He thrived on reaction, on me getting flustered. Not tonight. Dinner was served about an hour later. The table was long and overly formal, Mom sitting at one end, Dad at the other, with Caleb and me across from each other in the center. The air was thick with small talk and tension. At one point, Mom raised her glass. "We're just so proud of both our boys," she said sweetly. "Caleb for graduating, and Owen for, well, whatever it is you're doing these days." A few chuckles rippled around the table. My aunt shot me a sympathetic glance, but I stayed silent, letting them dig their own hole. Then Dad leaned forward. "We heard your music's doing well," he said, pretending to sound casual. "Maybe you could invest in something meaningful. Help out your family a little." There it was. The real reason I was invited. I set my glass down. "Help out how?" Mom smiled tightly. "Well, your brother's starting his own practice. He's got the brains, but he could use a partner. Someone with resources." "Resources?" I repeated, my voice calm but sharp. "You mean money?" Dad chuckled like I was being dramatic. "It's not about money, son. It's about family. Caleb's success is all of ours." I let out a small laugh. Interesting, because when I was struggling, I don't remember anyone saying my pain was the family's too. The room went still. Caleb leaned back in his chair, trying to regain control. "Come on, Owen. Don't be bitter. This could be a great opportunity for you to make things right." I tilted my head. "Make things right." He nodded. "You know, after the whole video mess, people might have forgiven you, but the internet never forgets. Aligning with me, a respected professional, could help clean your image." For a moment, I couldn't even speak. I just stared at him, realizing how deep his arrogance went. He really believed he was doing me a favor. I smiled then, slow and deliberate. "You're right, Caleb. The internet doesn't forget." And that's when I pulled my phone from my pocket, turned the screen toward him, and pressed play. It was a short clip, maybe a minute long, but every word was crystal clear. His voice, his face, sitting in my apartment, holding my stolen guitar, laughing. "You should have stayed humble, little bro. Maybe this will teach you." The table fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Caleb's expression froze. Where did you?" "I installed cameras after the first time you broke in," I said calmly. "Guess you forgot about those." Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. "Caleb, what is this?" He stammered, his face pale. "It's fake. He's lying." But I was already pulling out the second piece of evidence, a printed police report from the break-in. "I didn't press charges before," I said. "Didn't want to ruin your life. But seeing as you're still lying about it, maybe it's time I stop protecting you." My father looked between us, his face red. You recorded your brother?" I turned to him. "No, he recorded me. He made fake videos to ruin my name, broke into my home, and stole from me. I just documented the truth." Whispers spread around the table. Aunt Linda's hand covered her mouth. Caleb looked cornered, his jaw tightening. "You can't prove." "Actually," I said, cutting him off, "I can." I tapped my phone again, this time opening a private web page, my lawyer's website. "Meet my new manager." And yes, he's also an attorney. We've been preparing a civil case for months. Libel, defamation, property theft, all neatly documented. The color drained completely from Caleb's face. Mom reached for him, whispering, "Tell me this isn't true." He didn't answer. I leaned back, calm, steady. "Don't worry, I'm not pressing charges yet. But I wanted everyone here to see who the real victim is. And if any of you ever repeat what he posted about me again," I looked around the table, my voice quiet but firm, "you'll be hearing from him too." I slid my chair back and stood up. No yelling, no tears, just quiet power. Before I left, I turned to my mother. "You once said I should be more like Caleb. I think I finally understand why that was such a terrible idea." Then I looked at Caleb one last time. Frozen, humiliated, his perfect image cracked for everyone to see. "By the way," I said with a faint smile, "I'll be releasing a new song next week. It's called Family Business. Thought you might enjoy it." I walked out before anyone could say a word. Outside, the air felt sharp and clean, like the first breath after being underwater too long. I could hear murmurs from inside, disbelief, anger, the crumbling sound of a reputation collapsing. When I got in my car, I sat there for a minute, letting the moment sink in. The same house that once made me feel small was now just another backdrop, a place I'd outgrown. I turned on the engine, rolled down the window, and drove away without looking back. And that night, when I got home, I picked up my new guitar and wrote a final verse to a song I'd been working on. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was calm, the kind of peace that comes when you stop needing revenge and start living like you've already won. Because that's the thing about people who try to destroy you. They never expect you to rise quietly. They expect you to break. But I didn't break. I rebuilt. And this time, they had to watch. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the next morning, the family group chat, which I hadn't opened in over a year, was a battlefield. Dozens of messages, arguments, accusations. It was like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline and walking away before the explosion. I didn't even have to reply. They were tearing each other apart without me. My aunt texted first. "Aunt Linda, you did the right thing. They needed to be exposed. Don't let anyone guilt you for defending yourself." I thanked her, but she didn't know half of it. The confrontation at that dinner had gone viral in its own way, not online, but inside the community where my parents and Caleb thrived. Their perfect reputation, the one they protected for years like it was sacred, was finally cracked open for everyone to see. Word spread quickly through relatives and friends. The Golden family wasn't so golden anymore. Apparently, a few of Caleb's friends who were at the dinner filmed snippets after I left. Nothing incriminating from my side, but enough to show Caleb stammering, my mom crying, and my dad yelling about betrayal. Someone posted it on a local gossip forum, and within days, it made its way around our small town. Suddenly, my family wasn't the model of perfection. They were the cautionary tale. Mom called me 3 days later. Her voice was shaky, tired. "Owen, please. You've humiliated us." "Mom," I said calmly, "I didn't humiliate you. I just stopped covering for you." She tried to sound sympathetic, that same old tone she'd use when she wanted control. "Your brother is devastated. He hasn't left his room." "Good," I said, before I could stop myself. Then softer, "Maybe he'll finally know what it feels like." She sighed, sniffling. "We're family. We should be helping each other, not destroying each other." That line almost made me laugh. I was never family to you, Mom. I was just the comparison point. The reminder of what Caleb wasn't. There was silence on the other end, and for once, she didn't have a quick response. Just a small, broken, "We didn't mean for it to go this far." But it had, and now there was no going back. After that call, I blocked her number. Not out of anger this time, but out of peace. In the weeks that followed, the ripples of that night spread wider. Caleb's graduation opportunity? Gone. The practice he'd been bragging about turned out to be an internship offer, one that was quietly withdrawn after his employers saw the police report I'd filed, and then reactivated when I gave them permission to view the evidence. Apparently, they didn't want someone with a pending civil case for break-in and libel around their clients. I didn't even have to lift a finger. The truth had a way of doing its own work once it was free. My parents tried damage control. They called relatives, pleaded with friends, even sent out long messages about how misunderstood Caleb was. But the more they tried to fix it, the worse it got. Everyone had seen the cracks now. The favoritism, the manipulation, the double standards. Even my dad's co-workers started distancing themselves. My aunt told me she overheard one of them whispering, "Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." For a family obsessed with appearances, that kind of quiet judgment was the ultimate punishment. And Caleb, well, he fell the hardest. A few weeks later, I got a message from one of his old friends. "Dude, your brother's been losing it. He won't stop ranting about you. Says you ruined his life." I didn't reply, but I won't lie. It felt good to read that. Not because I wanted him destroyed, but because for once, he was the one feeling powerless. Then came the night that closed the chapter completely. It was late, past midnight, when I heard a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a split second, my chest tightened, thinking maybe it was him again. But when I opened the door, Caleb was standing there, drenched from the rain, looking nothing like the arrogant brother I remembered. His eyes were red, his posture slouched. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't performing. He looked small. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I hesitated but stepped aside. He walked in slowly, glancing around the apartment like he was seeing it for the first time. He sat down at the table, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. The sound of the rain hitting the window filled the silence. Finally, he said, "You destroyed me." I exhaled, leaning against the counter. "No, Caleb. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped letting you drag me down with you." He rubbed his face, shaking his head. "You think you're better than me now?" I shook mine. "No. I just learned the difference between love and control." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "They won't even talk to me. Dad's furious. Mom cries all the time. Aunt Linda won't answer my calls. It's like everyone turned on me overnight." "That's what happens," I said softly, "when you live off lies. They catch up eventually." He looked up at me then, his voice trembling. "I didn't think it'd go this far. I just wanted you to stop making me look bad." That line hit me harder than I expected. Stop making me look bad. That's all this had ever been about. It wasn't jealousy of what I had. It was jealousy of who I was becoming. I was proof that he wasn't the perfect son they thought he was. "You did that yourself, Caleb," I said. "All I did was tell the truth." He looked down, then nodded slowly. I guess I deserved it. For the first time, he wasn't defensive. He wasn't smirking or blaming me. He looked human, regretful even. He stood to leave, but paused by the door. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it." I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I wasn't ready to give him what he wanted: absolution. Not yet. He left quietly, disappearing into the rain. I never saw him again after that night. A month later, Aunt Linda told me he'd moved out of state, trying to start over. My parents sold the house and downsized. From what she said, Dad had a mild stroke, and Mom spends most of her time taking care of him. I didn't feel joy hearing it, just a kind of melancholy acceptance. The past had finally collapsed under its own weight. Meanwhile, my life kept moving forward. The album I'd been working on, Glass Houses, released that spring. It debuted modestly, but word of mouth carried it fast. Critics called it haunting, sincere, and a quiet masterpiece. The final track, 18, was the most personal one I'd ever written. It told the story of that night, the birthday I never got to have, the family that tried to control me, and the freedom I found by walking away. It wasn't angry. It was reflective, and people connected to it deeply. One of the comments under the official upload said, "This song sounds like someone finally closing a chapter." They were right. When the royalties came in, I donated part of them to a youth shelter near my old neighborhood. Kids who aged out of the system, kids who had nowhere to go when they turned 18. It felt like giving that scared version of myself a voice, a chance, a home. Sometimes, I'd still think about my family, not with hatred, but with distance, like characters from a book I'd already finished reading. And every once in a while, when I played 18 live, I'd spot someone in the crowd with that same haunted look I used to wear. Someone who'd been told their feelings didn't matter. And when I sang the last line, I sang it for them, because I knew what it meant to finally be seen. One night, after a show, a fan came up to me. She looked nervous, maybe 17 or 18, holding a crumpled piece of paper with my lyrics on it. "That line," she said quietly, "the one about walking away to become real, it saved me." I smiled at her and said the only thing I could think of, then it did what it was meant to. When she left, I sat alone backstage, looking at the empty stage lights fading to black. It hit me that my story, the pain, the betrayal, the silence, had turned into something that healed others. That was the real revenge. Not the confrontation, not the exposure, not even the downfall of the people who tried to destroy me. The real revenge was living a life so honest, so full, that the ones who broke me would have to watch from afar, powerless to rewrite it. And as for me, I finally celebrated that 18th birthday, 1 year late, but properly this time. Just me, a few real friends, and a cake with too many candles. When they asked what I was wishing for, I smiled and said, "Nothing. I already got it." Because for the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. I was free. And freedom, after a lifetime of being silenced, was the sweetest revenge of all.